Well, good morning, Year 12 accounting students. Here we go again. Oh, look at that. That's my hole-in-one at St Andrews Beach. I don't know how that got there. 5 iron, 148 metres, I believe, uphill. Terrific golf shot. Looking forward to getting back on the golf course at some stage. Right, let's go through these solutions to your SAC. So let me drag this down here and move me into the top right corner. Okay, so question 1, which was sort of done reasonably well by most of you, but we need to emphasise to quite a few students what net realisable value is. Now, you had a lot of practice actually, had a lot of detailed explanations from me, and I constantly said that it's the estimated selling price less cost of marketing, selling and distributing the item. So the selling price was $90, which most of you identify, which was the 99 less the GST. Each customer gets 2 boxes of tree decorations. Each box costs $6. So why some of you decide to add that, I don't know, right? Because net realisable value, net means a gross figure less something, right? So $90 minus the 12, which is the 2 boxes of decorations, gives you an NRV of 78. Then consequential errors would kick in. So in terms of what you did on the next one, inventory write-down, so some of you had 210. The only way you could get 210 would be suddenly changing this $12 up here and making it 6. Right? And that would give you the 84, which gives you a $21 write-down, and $21 times the 10 gives you 210. Some of you got 198, I don't know. Maybe you'll have to let me know. So we got $78 NRV, and you can see there that one's costed at 75. So NRV is higher than that one, so you don't touch that one. The only one we're going to touch is this one here, where the cost price is 105, right, and the NRV is 78. So it needs to be reduced by $27. So 27 times 10. So in your narration, you need to have 10 identified. You need to have the item identified, and you need to have the document. I think I've said that a few times as well. Narration for inventory requires 3 things: quantity, item, document reference. All right, so review that for those who didn't get that correct. But net realisable value, you must subtract from the estimated selling price. This was a fairly straightforward one. Most of you answered that quite well. So qualitative characteristic is clearly faithful representation. So if we don't reduce the inventory value by 270, our inventory is overstated. Therefore, owner's equity is overstated. That's misleading. And therefore, one could argue unethical, that you're not telling the true picture of how your business is going. So talk about what faithful representation means, removal of bias, making sure your accounting records are accurate, represents or reflects a real-world economic event, that is what they're currently worth, and the impact if I don't adjust it on my balance sheet reporting and misleading information influencing users of the data. But overall, not too bad. Then we went to the product costs. So we did this quite a few times. So a lot of it doesn't sink in. In fact, I reckon there's almost that exact same type of document about 5 times on the practice SACs and in my notes. So those are clearly your cost prices, product cost, that is, 120, 140, 155. The import duties, right, are 15%, which means they're 15% on everything. So can I logically allocate 15% to all of those? Yes, I can. Doesn't matter what they are, they're all getting 15%. So does it relate to getting the inventory into position? Yes, without the import duties, I can't get them. So that should have been a product cost. And as a bit of a tip, most questions usually have a decision between one product and one period. So unlikely that you're going to be required to put both of those as a period cost. Cartage inwards, correct, we couldn't logically allocate it. So the correct entry should have been inventory, including the import duties, cartage inwards on its own, GST, accounts payable. So most of you got it all right apart from the cartage. Apart from the import duties. You had import duties shown separately. Right, so again, let's go to this. This is the big one. So look, discuss requires you to do exactly that. Right? So discuss means that we are required to look at opposing viewpoints. So you make one point for supporting or against, then the other point has to be against or supporting. So most of you identify that the coloured ribbon and fake flower costs were product costs. They relate to getting inventory ready for sale, and we could logically allocate them. However, it was only $1.95, so your contrary point of view should have been it's not significant, and it's not going to have a huge impact or any impact on decision making and on the balance sheet figures, so we could quite reasonably treat that as a period cost. Right, so that's the alternative point of view. The amount wasn't that particularly significant. You may recall we did one where there were 5 cents worth of stickers to a $65 item, and we discussed that it's your choice. You could either treat it as a product cost or as a period cost because it's fairly insignificant. So discuss question. Many of you on the 3 or 4 discuss questions only gave one side of the argument. So lost a mark, lost a mark, lost a mark, lost a mark. They all add up. So fix that with discuss questions. Inventory cards done really well. So everyone loves inventory cards. Make sure that you are going for a return up that direction. So therefore you've got to keep the same order here. Right? So the 90, if it's at the bottom there, has to stay at the bottom here. Right? Some of you have had those flipped around. So that's about the only thing I can recall. Rest was quite good. So definition of revenue, all very good. Don't put in the part about liabilities because inventory gains got nothing to do with liabilities. So if you add something in that applies to the total definition but doesn't relate to that example, right, then you will lose a mark in the exam. Okay. Also, when you say it increases owner's equity, that's correct, but it's always nice to add why is owner's equity going up, because we're getting more revenue, therefore profit is going up. Also, obviously mention the fact that assets are going up because of the increase in inventory due to the inventory gain. Apart from identifying a inventory loss or gain, a benefit. So some of you just didn't, you put down one thing, but didn't say, well, why is that a benefit? Right, so it helps with reordering, so I know when I'm running out, identifies fast and slow moving lines of inventory. Right, so that means I can tell which ones to maybe change pricing structure with, or which ones to have a clearance sale. And so we know the inventory balances at any point in time. So most of you got 1 mark for that, no problem. Right, why would we use identified costs? So again, use the material in the question. So identified or FIFO usually comes back to the item. So as we discussed in class, fruit and vegetables, petrol stations, you can't use it identified. It's not possible. These were ovens, right? So I'm pretty sure you can look around a store and see, well, yeah, I've got 10 ovens there. They're standing out like the proverbial. So they're easily barcoded or labelled or tagged, and visually also easy to identify. So that's the reason or justification for it, right? Plus, it's going to give me a more accurate profit result for the period. I'm not using an assumption of inventory flows as I would under FIFO. So justify identified because the item involved is physical, it's big, it's easy to see, easy to mark, easy to label, easy to tag. And it's going to result in a more accurate profit result within the period. The effect on gross profit, if I use first in, first out, I was really pleased that so many of you used the data. So you've learned that topic really well. So you went to the items and you thought, well, where is first in, first out going to kick in? Right, so you can see here that the first sale, well, they were only 1250, so it wouldn't matter what method I used. Then you went down to the 19th, and you can see here I've taken 1300 out when I had a choice of 1250 or 1300s. So Identified's grabbed the 1300, whereas FIFO would have grabbed the 1250. So you can see there the effect on profit. Identified's expensing 1300, FIFO would have only expensed 1250, a difference of $50. The last one here wouldn't matter because it's still FIFO or Identified following the same approach. So the only time where this applied was this transaction here. Right? So Identified went for the 1300, FIFO would have gone for the 1250. And therefore your profit is overstated by $50 if I used FIFO instead of Identified. And there's the explanation there. First in, first out costs out the earlier or older inventory, which is cheaper, so therefore your cost of sales is lower. Use the example where it was a $50 difference, and that would explain the effect on your gross profit. If I use first in, first out, gross profit will be higher compared to Identified within this one period. But generally very well answered, so I was quite impressed with that. So the trend in account, I'll obviously increase, but I'd probably go with it's slower or worse. So you could say state the trend, it's increasing, which is slower and worse. Strategy, generally well done, but again, it was a discuss question. So a lot of you came unstuck there because you only gave 1.4 the strategy. So yes, you could have gone with either reducing inventory levels, which is the numerator. And if you reduce inventory levels, you improve inventory turnover. The downside of that is that you might not be able to meet all of your customer demands and run out of inventory and lose customers. Reduce selling prices might have been an example to improve the cost of sales on the denominator by selling more inventory. However, the downside of that is your profit margin is reduced. Advertising would increase sales, the denominator cost of sales, but the downside of that, it's an expense which might lead to an overall lower profit. Right? So you need to look at both sides of your strategy, for and against. The trend in accounts payable was a little tricky because obviously it was slower, so you could easily get the one point about liquidity being negatively affected. So you can see here that the accounts payable turnover has gone from 25 days down to 15, but it sort of hints in the question that Barbara's negotiated with her supplier. So there's only one supplier, and the terms are 2% discount within 7 days. So clearly we're not below 7. So we're paying early, not getting any discount. So you could argue that she's obviously got plenty of cash because she's paying before the due date as the positive in terms of the effect on liquidity. Although it's not really a great response because it says discuss the effect of the trend on the liquidity. So it's negatively affecting liquidity, which you clearly identified. Maybe you could argue that she might have been paying earlier, moving towards taking advantage of the discount. But the question made it quite tricky to come up with an opposing point of view. So the only one I could probably go with would have been she's obviously got a very healthy cash position to be able to pay her accounts early, even though she's not getting the discount. So overall, pretty good. So lots of students in the 20s, quite a few in the high 20s. So quite a good understanding. Quick recap for those who made a mess of the first one, understand exactly what net realisable value calculation involves. Make sure your discuss questions are giving an alternative viewpoint. And that's probably the main points I would make. So well done. Looks like most of you have learnt that topic quite well, but I'd certainly review your theory in a few cases to improve your understanding. Right, I'll have a little chat about this in class at Google Meet, but overall, well done.